Harper Nolan dropped her keys twice before even unlocking the front door of the East Ridge Hotel, her nerves buzzing as she stepped inside the grand marble-floored lobby. She wasn't a hotel receptionist. She was a temp admin assistant who usually worked filing contracts in a quiet municipal office. But when her cousin Mia called last night, coughing and desperate, Harper agreed to fill in at the hotel front desk for one day. Just one. How hard could it be? Just smile, answer the phones, check people in. Mia had rasped through the phone. You'll wear the uniform, act like you belong. Easy. Harper smoothed the stiff navy blazer over her white blouse and stepped behind the desk, pretending the sleek computer and glowing reservation screen didn't completely intimidate her. The East Ridge wasn't just any hotel, it was one of the most luxurious in the city. Crystal chandeliers, velvet armchairs, and a front desk that looked more like a jewelry store counter. She was barely 10 minutes into pretending she knew what she was doing when the elevator dinged and a man stepped through the revolving doors, tall. Dark coat, confident stride. Designer luggage in one hand, phone in the other. His presence shifted the air in the lobby. Harper stood a little straighter, ready to smile and check him in like a pro, but when he reached the desk, he looked up from his phone and locked eyes with her, blue eyes. Not cold, but sharp. His jaw was too perfect. His voice, when he finally spoke, was low and smooth. I have a reservation, Jameson Drake. Harper stared for a second too long before realizing he was waiting. Oh yes, sorry, she said quickly, clicking at the keyboard like she had a clue. Mr. Drake, let me just find you. The name sounded familiar. She couldn't place it, but it nagged at her. While she searched, he raised an eyebrow. Are you new? Just filling in today, she said, forcing a smile. Don't worry, I haven't broken anything yet. That made him chuckle. It wasn't a forced laugh either. It was real, low and warm and unexpected. Let's hope I don't change that streak, he said. She found his reservation penthouse suite, 3 nights private car service, and quickly handed him a key card. You're all set. Welcome to East Ridge. Jameson took the card but didn't move. Do you always smile like that when you're nervous? Her cheeks flushed. Only when billionaires are standing in front of me. He laughed again, surprised this time. So you know who I am? I didn't, she said honestly. But I do now. His smile lingered as he lifted his suitcase and stepped away. Well, Harper, she blinked. How do you know my name? He nodded to her name tag. Oh, right. I'll see you around, he said, and walked toward the elevator. Harper exhaled the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She turned back to the computer, trying to refocus, but her heart was still racing. Jameson Drake. She'd heard of him now, CEO of Drake Innovations, tech mogul, billionaire, and apparently staying in the penthouse for 3 nights. She had no idea why he'd looked at her that way, or why her hands were still shaking. By the end of the day, Harper had managed to check in a dozen guests, answer phones, and not get fired. She was halfway through organizing the front desk drawer when a soft voice called out. You're still here. Jameson stood by the concierge table, no coat now, just a black button-down rolled at the sleeves, exposing strong forearms. He looked more like he belonged on the cover of a magazine than in a lobby. I thought you'd be gone by now, he said. Harper shrugged. I told Mia I'd stay until midnight. She's still sick. He walked over, leaning against the counter. You don't work here, do you? She hesitated. Not exactly. So what do you do? I answer phones and file papers and sometimes bring donuts to cranky city department heads. He grinned. A woman of mystery and pastries, she laughed. That's me, a beat past. His gaze didn't waver. You're not what I expected, he said. Because I'm not falling over myself to impress you, she teased. Exactly. He looked like he wanted to say more, but the concierge returned and Jameson backed away. Good night, Harper. Good night, Mr. Drake. The next morning, she was back behind the desk. Mia still wasn't better, so Harper had agreed to do one more day, just one more. Only this time, Jameson came down earlier. This time, he brought her coffee. I figured you earned it, he said, setting it on the desk. You survived yesterday. You brought me coffee, she asked, surprised. You remembered my name. I thought I'd return the favor. She took the cup. It had her name written on it in neat black ink. Somehow, that little detail made her chest warm. He didn't stay long, just enough to ask her what music she liked and if she always wore her hair pulled back like that. His questions didn't feel like small talk. They felt real. That night he came down again, no coat, no phone, just him, and he asked her to sit with him in the lounge after her shift. "I don't usually hang out with hotel guests," she said. "Good," he replied, "because I don't usually ask." She sat with him anyway. They talked for hours, about books, about her dreams to maybe one day open her own little coffee shop, about his company which he'd built from nothing, about the fact he hated being called sir, and that his favorite food was grilled cheese. She didn't want the night to end. On the third day, it rained. Harper wore her hair down. She didn't know why. Maybe because he'd said something about it the night before, maybe because it made her feel more like herself. Jameson noticed immediately. "You look different," he said. "Good different or weird different?" He leaned closer. "Beautiful different." Before she could respond, a hotel manager appeared behind her. "Harper, can I speak with you?" She followed her into the back office, heart pounding. "You've been doing great," the manager said. "But Mr. Drake just requested to extend his stay another week." Harper blinked. "What?" He said. "He's enjoying the city. And the service." Harper returned to the front desk, trying not to think too hard, but when she looked up and met his eyes again, she knew he wasn't staying for the city, he was staying for her. Harper hadn't meant to look for him. Honestly, she hadn't. But when a private town car pulled up curbside and a valet opened the back door like he was handling royalty, her gaze had drifted. And there he was, stepping out into the drizzle like he didn't notice the rain, slipping a phone into his pocket and glancing once, just once, across the lobby. Their eyes met, and that was all it took. An electric current, sharp and sudden, passed through her chest. She turned away too quickly, busying herself with a clipboard that didn't need her attention. It didn't help. Her fingers twitched with anticipation, like they already knew he'd cross the floor toward her, and he did. "You're early," she said without looking up. "So are you. I like to be on time. I like to see you before the lobby fills up." She finally looked at him. "That sounds dangerously close to flirting." He rested his hands on the counter, not touching but close enough to make her breath catch. "Would it be a problem if it was?" "I'm not sure," she said. "I haven't decided yet." "Then I'll keep showing up until you do." He left her with that, and the scent of something warm and expensive in the air where he'd stood. Later that afternoon, the hotel's assistant manager approached her with a clipped voice and an armful of gold-edged invitations. "Drake Innovations is hosting a private gala tomorrow night. Mr. Drake requested that the invitations be distributed by hand to select guests and staff." Harper accepted the envelope with her name on it, but said nothing. She waited until she was alone in the back office before slipping it open. Inside was a single card, thick and embossed. "You are cordially invited to the Drake Innovations Winter Gala." Black tie. Location undisclosed until car service arrival. Her name was handwritten at the top, no +1. She stared at it, pulse racing, throat dry. There was no mistake. This wasn't a courtesy invite handed out to anyone who'd crossed his path. This was intentional. Personal. When she returned to the front desk, Jameson was seated in the lounge, flipping through a newspaper he clearly wasn't reading. She walked over, envelope in hand. "I think this came to the wrong person," she said. He folded the paper and met her eyes without hesitation. "It didn't. I'm not in your world. Maybe I'm tired of mine," she hesitated. "You barely know me." "Then let me." A beat passed. "What do I even wear to something like this?" "I already took care of that," he said. She narrowed her eyes. "Excuse me." "There'll be a delivery for you tonight. Don't worry, it's not green." She blinked. "How did you know I hate green?" He looked far too pleased with himself. "I pay attention." The dress arrived in a black garment bag with her name stitched into the tag. It was unlike anything she'd ever owned. Midnight blue, off the shoulder. Fitted bodice with tiny, crystal-like beads scattered across the fabric like stars. She stared at it for a long time in her apartment, trying to convince herself not to wear it, that showing up would be a mistake, that this couldn't be real. But when the black car pulled up outside her building, she walked down the steps and got in. No address. No clue where they were going. Just the hum of tires on pavement and the city lights blurring past her window. The car pulled up to a private rooftop terrace atop a downtown high-rise she'd never even noticed before. Two men in tuxedos opened the doors. Inside, it was pure magic. Fairy lights strung across glass panels, a live string quartet playing something low and romantic, and a crowd dressed in gowns and tuxedos sipping champagne. And at the center of it all, Jameson. He was standing near a stone balcony, deep in conversation with a man who looked important. But when he saw her, the words stopped. His entire focus shifted. She stepped out of the elevator, heart pounding. He looked like he wanted to say something, but instead he held out his hand. "You came. You didn't really give me a choice. Would you have come if I had?" She didn't answer. He led her to a quieter part of the terrace near the edge where the skyline stretched behind them like a painted backdrop. "You look like a secret I'm not supposed to know," he said, voice low. "That's a very dangerous thing to say." "I don't do safe," he replied. "Not anymore." She turned to face him fully. "Why me?" He didn't flinch. "Because you don't try to impress me, you challenge me, you make me feel like I have to earn your attention and I want to." She swallowed hard. "You don't even know what I want. Then tell me." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. "I want to be seen," she said finally. "Not managed, not pitied, not used, just seen." He reached up, brushing a piece of hair behind her ear. "Then I'll see you, every version. Even the ones you try to hide." The music shifted behind them, slower now, and he extended his hand without a word. She hesitated only a second before taking it. He pulled her close, one hand at her waist, the other holding hers like it was the most natural thing in the world. They danced, not perfectly, not with practiced steps, but with something deeper. A rhythm born from tension and possibility. When the music faded, he didn't let go. "Tell me to stop," he said quietly. She didn't. He kissed her, not softly, not cautiously, but with the kind of intensity that demanded truth. That shattered every excuse she'd built up over the past 24 hours. When they broke apart, breathless, she whispered the only thing she could manage. "I don't know what comes next." He touched his forehead to hers. "Neither do I. But I'm not leaving." Harper didn't return to work the next day. She wasn't sick. She wasn't avoiding Jameson. She just couldn't risk doing something reckless like falling harder for a man whose world she didn't belong in. The night of the gala had left her raw, every nerve lit up with something she didn't have the language for. And that kiss, it hadn't been a mistake. That was the problem. She spent the day curled on her couch, the blue dress still hanging untouched in its garment bag in the corner, too beautiful to belong in her tiny studio apartment. She told herself it had been a one-time thing, a moment caught between champagne and moonlight. But the longer she sat in silence, the more she felt the weight of something unfinished pressing against her chest. By late evening, her phone buzzed with a number she didn't recognize. She didn't answer. Seconds later, a knock sounded at her door. She froze. No one ever came to her building this late. It was barely above a walk-up, and the buzzer hadn't worked for months. She crossed the room hesitantly and opened the door just a crack. Jameson stood outside, wearing jeans and a dark sweater, no suit, no driver, no entourage, just him. And in his hand, a clear container filled with what looked suspiciously like tomato soup and a perfectly grilled sandwich wrapped in foil. "You're avoiding me," he said. She opened the door wider. "You brought food. You didn't answer your phone." "I figured bribery was my best option." She stepped aside without a word, and he entered, glancing around her apartment like he was memorizing it. "I didn't think you'd actually come here," she said. "I didn't think you'd disappear." "I didn't disappear. I took time to think. Did it help? I'm still confused." He set the food down gently on her small kitchen counter, then leaned against it, arms crossed. "I shouldn't have kissed you," he said. Her heart dropped. "I should have told you first that I didn't invite you to the gala to impress anyone. I did it because I didn't want to pretend anymore. I've spent so long surrounded by people who only speak to me because of what I can give them. You're the first person who's ever made me want to give without being asked." She stared at him. You think you can just say that and it fixes everything? No, he said, but I'm not going to take back the truth to make it easier. She sat down on the edge of the couch, hands clasped tightly. You don't know what I've been through? Then tell me. She hesitated, then looked up at him. I was engaged. 2 years ago, he left 3 weeks before the wedding, said I wasn't ambitious enough, that I didn't want more from life. Everyone thought I should have seen it coming. I didn't. Jameson's expression didn't change, but something in his stance softened. I stayed small because I thought it was safer, she continued. And then you walked into the hotel and everything felt too big again. He crossed the room slowly and sat beside her, not touching, just close. I know what it's like to be left, he said quietly. My father walked out when I was 13, took everything from the company bank account and vanished. I built Drake Innovations from the ashes of what he destroyed. She turned toward him, startled. I didn't know that. I don't tell many people. They assume I started with billions. I didn't. I started with debt and an old laptop I had to borrow. Silence settled between them like a tide pulling back. I don't want to be a mistake you regret, he said. You're not a mistake, she whispered. He reached out, gently brushing his fingers against hers. Then let me take you somewhere. Tomorrow, no suits, no champagne, just you and me, she hesitated. Where? You'll see, she considered for a moment before nodding. Okay. The next morning, he picked her up in a vintage convertible cream-colored leather seats, the kind of car that turned heads at every stoplight. He drove them out of the city, down winding roads flanked by golden trees and early autumn air that smelled like forgetting. They ended up at a quiet lakeside dock with a small wooden boat tied to the edge. A picnic basket waited inside. I didn't even know places like this existed outside of movies, she said, laughing as he helped her into the boat. They don't, he replied. I had this one built 2 years ago. No service, no staff, no noise. They drifted on still water, the only sound the soft splash of oars and the occasional bird overhead. She took off her shoes and dipped her toes into the water, carefree in a way she hadn't felt in years. As they unpacked the picnic, she picked up a small photo tucked between 2 napkins. It was old, black and white Jameson as a teenager, standing next to a rusted-out sedan, grinning. I found that car in a junkyard, he said. Spent 2 summers fixing it. Sold it to pay for my first prototype. She turned the photo over. On the back, in faded ink, was a single word, begin. It's how I remind myself not to get stuck, he said. Every time I think I've made it, I remember how it felt to start with nothing. She looked at him, the man who had everything, and realized just how much he'd given up to have it. I wish I could be brave like that, she said. You already are, he replied. You let me in. As the sun dipped lower, casting gold across the water, she leaned back against the cushion and closed her eyes. For once, she didn't feel like she was pretending. And as Jameson rowed them back to shore beneath a sky streaked with firelight, she understood something she hadn't dared admit before. She wasn't just falling for him. She already had. The Monday after the lake, Harper arrived back at the East Ridge Hotel not in uniform, not behind the desk, but as herself. She'd called Mia that morning, who finally felt well enough to return. Harper hadn't intended to come in at all, but something about staying away now felt incomplete. She needed to see the place where everything had started, where a chance favor turned into a story she hadn't expected to live. More than that, she needed to see him on her terms. As she walked through the lobby, she spotted Jameson near the elevators, deep in conversation with a woman in a slate gray pantsuit. Harper hesitated. The woman's tone was clipped, her expression severe. Harper couldn't hear the words, but there was something unmistakably tense in the set of Jameson's shoulders. When the woman turned and walked away, Jameson caught sight of Harper. You weren't supposed to be here today, he said, approaching. I wasn't. But I realized I didn't want to avoid coming here just because things changed, she replied. Also, I left my umbrella in the back office. You didn't, he said, his voice low. I checked. She narrowed her eyes. You went looking for my umbrella. I may have wanted a reason to call you. You never needed one, she paused. Who was she? He looked past her for a moment as if choosing his words carefully. That was Lenora Crane. She's the head of the board, technically my boss, though I own more than half the company. She didn't look happy. She's not. She thinks I've been distracted lately, that my priorities are shifting. Are they? Yes, he said without hesitation. Harper glanced at the floor, then back up. And what does she think those priorities are? You. She hadn't expected him to say it so plainly. That's not fair to you, she said quietly. You've worked your entire life for this, and I'm not throwing it away, but I'm also not going to let someone else decide what happiness is supposed to look like for me. She looked at him, searching for doubt. There wasn't any. Come with me, he said. Where? He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a single silver key. I want to show you something I haven't shown anyone. She hesitated, then took the key from his hand. They left the hotel through a side entrance, the city winding around them as they walked several blocks until they reached a narrow side street lined with shuttered buildings and faded awnings. Jameson stopped in front of a cast iron gate, unlocked it, and led her up a flight of stairs to a rooftop garden untamed, overgrown, and breathtaking. I bought this building 5 years ago, he said. I was going to turn it into another tech hub, then I came up here and found this. An abandoned rooftop greenhouse. Someone tried to start something beautiful here and gave up. I couldn't bring myself to tear it down. She stepped inside the glass archway, the scent of wild jasmine and forgotten soil filling the air. I come here when I need to remember I'm not a machine, he said. I thought maybe you'd understand what that means. She turned toward him. I do. He walked to one of the planters and pulled something out from beneath a loose stone. A small notepad, edges curled, pages filled with sketches, coffee mugs, chairs, names of imaginary blends. You left your notebook in the car, he said. I copied a few of the pages before I returned it. You copied them? I wanted to remember what it felt like to dream again. She reached for the notepad, flipping through the pages. Her own handwriting stared back at her, ideas she'd scribbled without thinking anyone would ever see them. I have a proposal, he said. Is this where you ask me to move in with you and run away to some island? No, he said, smiling. This is where I ask you to let me invest in your dream, quietly. No press, no strings, just belief. Why? She asked. Because I want to build something that doesn't come with a stock price, and because the world needs places where people like you get to create without permission. She shook her head, overwhelmed. What if I fail? Then we build again, her voice caught. I don't know how to say yes to something this big. You don't have to say yes now, but I'm not offering because I pity you. I'm offering because I believe in you. She looked around the rooftop, this hidden corner of the world he'd never shown anyone, and then she looked at him. I want to try, she said, but on one condition, name it. You don't get to disappear when things get hard. He stepped closer. I won't. Their hands found each other's without hesitation. Weeks later, Harper stood in front of a chalkboard menu with trembling fingers, writing the name of her first signature roast. Begin. The small cafe was hers. Tucked into a quiet street corner Jameson had helped her renovate, the space was filled with sunlight, worn wood, and soft jazz. There were no signs outside with his name, no mention of who funded it. He came by every morning, coffee in one hand, laptop in the other, and sat near the window like any other customer. One morning, after closing up early, Harper walked across the street where Jameson was waiting. Come with me, he said. They drove out past the city, past the lake, to a stretch of land he'd purchased quietly. He led her to the center where a single tree stood surrounded by nothing else. What is this? She asked. Our future, he said. I want to build something here, a home, not just for me, for us. If you want that too. She looked at him, heart full. I do. The kiss that followed wasn't rushed or desperate, it was steady, certain, and when they stood there beneath the tree, wind brushing through the branches above, it felt like everything had come full circle. She had filled in for one day, but she'd ended up rewriting the rest of her life. The first time Harper unlocked the cafe alone before sunrise, the world felt quieter than she remembered. The city hadn't yet stirred, but inside the warm, wood-scented space she'd built from the ground up alongside a man she hadn't expected to fall in love with, everything buzzed with life. She flipped the lights on one by one. The espresso machine hissed, the floors creaked just slightly under her boots, and the scent of cinnamon from the fresh batch of scones made the place feel like home. Not a borrowed future, not a borrowed life, but hers. It had only been 3 weeks since the soft opening, and word about the cafe had spread faster than she imagined. Local magazines had started calling. Influencers were asking to come take pictures. Harper had turned them all down. She didn't want flash, she wanted soul, and somehow she had both. The glass door swung open just as the clock hit 7, and Jameson stepped inside, wearing a slate blue coat and a dark scarf wrapped loosely around his neck. "You're here early," Harper said, wiping her hands on a towel. "Couldn't sleep." He walked to the counter. "You looked too good in my dream, and I had to come check if it was real," she laughed. "That's a terrible line," he leaned in. "It worked." "I'm still deciding if I'm impressed." His hand slid across the counter, palm up. "In that case, I'll have to try harder." She took his hand, fingers curling around his. "You already are." By 9, the cafe was filled with soft conversation and the clinking of cups. Harper moved easily behind the counter, pouring lattes, scribbling notes for new recipes, and greeting the regulars who already knew her name. Jameson stayed tucked in his usual corner, laptop open, coffee half finished, but his eyes followed her more than the screen. At noon, she stepped outside for air, needing a moment to stretch beneath the pale autumn sky. Jameson joined her, 2 cups in hand. "This one's yours," he said, offering her the one with the little cinnamon heart drawn in the foam. "You're getting good at this," she said, sipping. "I had a good teacher." They walked slowly down the block, Harper's hand brushing against his coat sleeve. "There's something I've been thinking about," she said. "Something I haven't told you." He looked over at her, instantly alert. "Everything okay?" "Yes, better than okay." "I've just been afraid to say it out loud." He stopped walking. "Whatever it is, say it." She drew in a breath. "I want to teach again. I used to help run after-school programs at the community center. I miss that part of me. The part that helped other people find their spark." "Then you should," he said without pause. "You don't have to choose between purpose and love. I'll make sure you never have to." She smiled, relieved. "I was scared it would be too much. I've seen you run a cafe, charm an entire neighborhood, and rebuild your life from scratch. There's nothing too much for you." He kissed her temple, soft and certain. "I'll help however you need." Later that week, Harper stood beside Jameson at a small city fundraiser, her dress a deep burgundy that matched the roses at each table. It wasn't a gala, it wasn't flashy. It was a benefit for the community center she'd mentioned, and he'd quietly written a check large enough to fund a year's worth of after-school programs. When the director thanked him at the podium, Jameson didn't say a word. He simply nodded, then reached for Harper's hand under the table. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. "I know. But you did anyway." "I'm not just building a life with you," he said. "I'm building the kind of world you deserve." After the event, they returned to the rooftop garden, the one no one else knew about. It had become their place, the spot where everything always felt clear. A small table waited near the far edge, 2 glasses of champagne, and a velvet box resting in the center. Harper froze. Jameson stepped beside her, heart in his eyes. "I never thought I'd want simplicity," he said. "But then you walked into a lobby pretending to be someone else, and somehow you still managed to be the most honest person I'd ever met." Her breath caught. "You didn't just change me," he said. "You reminded me who I wanted to be. And I know you're not the kind of woman who needs to be rescued, or impressed, or bought, but you're the kind of woman I want to spend every single day loving." He opened the box. Inside was a ring unlike any she'd ever seen, a delicate gold band with a single opal in the center, flanked by 2 tiny sapphires. He held it out. "Harper Nolan, will you build the rest of forever with me?" She didn't cry, not right away. She laughed, once bright and certain, then she said yes. Not because it was the right time, not because the ring was beautiful, but because everything in her life had led her here. To a love that made her feel seen, not saved. To a man who didn't just fit into her world but helped her expand it. They kissed beneath the tangled vines of the rooftop garden, the city lights blinking far below. And for once, there was no question, no hesitation, only yes, only them. 1 year later, the cafe was thriving. The after-school program was running in full swing. Harper taught 2 creative workshops a week, and her students left little drawings and sticky notes on the cafe walls that she refused to take down. Jameson still came in every morning, sometimes with new ideas, sometimes just to watch her work. They were married in the rooftop garden, surrounded by a small group of people who mattered most. Mia cried through the ceremony. The flowers were wild and messy and perfect. Harper wore a dress with pockets and danced barefoot by the end of the night. Jameson made a toast that included the words printer jam and destiny in the same sentence. They spent their honeymoon tucked away in the countryside. No phones, no press, just them and a fireplace that wouldn't stay lit unless Harper fixed it herself. And when they returned, hand in hand, the world didn't feel overwhelming anymore. It felt just right. Because love, when it's real, doesn't ask you to become someone else. It simply meets you where you are and stays.